Got it. I'll let everyone in around 9 seconds.
All right.
Okay. We all ready?
Sure, let's do it.
Sounds good. Let's go. Let me share my screen actually first. Almost forgot about that. Can you see my screen okay?
I can, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. And we are good to go. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to let everyone filter into the meeting real quick. And we'll begin shortly. All right, good day, everyone. Welcome. And we are very excited to have you here for this fireside chat. So before introducing today's dialogue, I just want to give a brief overview of the Youth AI Lab speaker series, since we have quite a few new audience members here. For those who are new to Youth AI Lab and what we do, my name is Melinda, and I am the president of Youth AI Lab. And we are a youth-led nonprofit US organization dedicated to increasing student to expert connections, AI literacy, and making high school students future ready. This webinar is part of our monthly speaker series to raise awareness of AI among all communities. We invite experts from academia, industry to share their knowledge and discovery in specific areas of AI. So unlike other technical talks, these talks are tailored to people without much background in AI. So therefore, they're fun to listen to and hopefully easy to follow. So we hope that by listening to these talks regularly, you'll gain a solid knowledge of AI. So please help spread the word about Youth AI Lab, and thank you for your support of this education and community service initiative. And also consider visiting our website at youthai.org and sign up to receive announcements for other upcoming events such as this one and more resources. And we have hosted 24 fantastic talks since the kickoff of the Youth AI Lab Speaker Series, and have just kicked off our inaugural youth speaker series last March with OpenAI researcher Dr. Yang Song. So if you want to keep up to date with any upcoming talks and events, you can either follow us on social media, Eventbrite, or register for our website on youthai.org. Our speaker series covers important areas of AI such as efficient AI, graphics AI, cognitive AI, finance AI, as well as different implications of AI. Our speakers are held in high regard in their respective fields, whether it be in academia or industry, from speakers ranging from top players in industries such as Meta, Microsoft, and speakers from universities such as Carnegie Mellon, MIT, UC Berkeley, and Stanford. Replays of these talks are mostly available on the Youth AI Lab YouTube channel, with a few exceptions for a couple talks, which are unfortunately not available on YouTube due to company policy. As for our last talk, we were honored to have Dr. Jiajun Liu, the CEO and founder of Aquil, talk about the ways generative AI is revolutionizing our world outside of things we might be more familiar with, such as ChatGPT, from AI-generated avatars to image generation, as well as how these developments tie in with his own work as the founder and CEO of Aquil, a company providing AGI-powered content and digitalization products for commerce for companies such as Coca-Cola. And of course, you are welcome to watch the replay of this fantastic talk on our YouTube channel, which is Youth AI Lab. As per Youth AI tradition, our speaker series will be on hiatus in December to celebrate the holidays along with our members. So please look forward to our return in January with even more exciting events in store. Our next upcoming talk, which will mark the start of a new year in January, is yet to be determined. So if you don't want to miss any updates, we definitely encourage you and suggest becoming a member on our website and following our Eventbrite to not miss any upcoming important information. And I've also sent the link in chat in case you want easier access. And before introducing our speaker, Dr. Lucas Joppa, I'd like to briefly go over the logistics of this fireside chat. So since we have an audience watching from our YouTube live stream as well as on Zoom, we'll be doing Q&A at the end through a platform called Slido. So you can either go to the URL that I'm about to send in the chat or go to Slido and enter event code 12363. We definitely encourage you to submit any questions throughout our discussion. We'll be answering questions as a part of the Fireside chat format, so you all, the audience, can engage in the conversation as well, which Dr. Joppa will be answering in the second half of the Fireside chat. So I've also just sent the link in the chat below, so feel free to go to the Slido and ask questions throughout the talk. And now to introduce our guest today, Dr. Lucas Joppa. Dr. Lucas Joppa recently joined Haveli Investments, a tech-focused private equity firm in 2022. His mission is to contribute to building a company that prioritizes sustainability in all aspects, from achieving net zero operations to investing in sustainable software solutions. Before Haveli, Dr. Joppa served as Microsoft's inaugural Chief Environmental Officer. During his tenure, he oversaw significant environmental initiatives, including Microsoft's commitment to becoming carbon negative by 2030 and removing all emitted carbon dioxide since 1975 from the atmosphere by 2050. Dr. Joppa played a key role in Microsoft's $1 billion Climate Innovation Fund, which supports technologies addressing global climate challenges, and in developing the Planetary Computer, a novel computing platform for monitoring and managing the Earth's natural systems. In his previous roles at Microsoft, he held positions as Chief Environmental Scientist and Computational Ecologist, additionally earning recognition as one of the world's most highly cited researchers. Dr. Joppa holds a PhD in ecology from Duke University and has been acknowledged on Fortune's 40 Under 40 list. So now, what you all have been waiting for, I'll first hand the floor over to our brilliant guest, Dr. Joppa, inviting him to delve a bit deeper into his background and share with us more about his work in the field, including shedding some light maybe on the insights from the intersection of AI and environmental initiatives. So let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Joppa. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Melinda. And I think for those of you who are on the live stream and follow along with the traditional format of these talks, I think we're doing it a little bit different this time around. We're doing a fireside chat, so I'll give a little bit of an overview, and then you and I, Melinda, will have a conversation, and then I think we're taking some questions as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. I thought I'd just give a brief overview before we get into some of the specific questions that I know that you have about, my background in tech and finance and why all of this stuff. But just to set the scene a little bit, as Melinda mentioned, I am the Chief Sustainability Officer and Senior Managing Director at a technology private equity firm called Haveli Investments. And Haveli Investments really focuses on software investments, and at the core of its operational thesis sits a focus on environmental sustainability. And the mandate for my work in that firm is to really think about how we position Haveli as one of the most environmentally sustainable private equity firms in the world. And we'll talk about how that relates to AI, but just remember what Haveli invests in is software and gaming. And so obviously AI, the computational systems and all that it encompasses and gets wrapped up into are all part and parcel of that. I also look after and I'm the executive sponsor for Haveli's AI strategy, both how we think about deploying AI in our own work and how the companies that we invest in deploy AI solutions in all across their kind of operations, no matter what kind of a company it is. So for me, I've always been an environment guy. We'll talk more about that. I've always been a tech guy, and now I'm a finance guy as well. But we've got AI sitting across all of that, and for a good reason, because I think it's both a technology and an approach that has massive potential to improve human livelihoods, to continue economic growth, and to, for the first time, begin to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation. But there's also some serious concerns that we have to think about as we build these systems up. So So that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's my current job. I'm trying to build the first net zero portfolio of companies. I'm trying to take what Melinda had mentioned. Microsoft had been working on trying to become a carbon negative company by 2030. I really am motivated in showing a few things. First and foremost, that's not just something that Microsoft can do. I want to show that lots of different companies can do that. And I want to show that you can invest as a software investor in software companies that are building the solutions to some of our environmental problems. And I have no doubt that a lot of those solutions are going to make strong use of the AI breakthroughs that we've seen over the past few years. And part of the reason that I believe that so strongly is because of where I came from. As Melinda said, I actually spent my entire career up until this point inside Microsoft. I think you've heard from people that are, currently or former members of the Microsoft research community, this kind of blue sky research division of Microsoft. I was one of those people as well, straight out of my PhD, which I completed at Duke University, studying ecology. I joined Microsoft Research, and my title was a computational ecologist. So I know a lot of the people on this call are not just early career, but like pre-career. And when I was pre-career, maybe we could talk about what I thought I was going to do back in the day. But I didn't know a job existed called a computational ecologist. And so I had the kind of like the privilege and the joy really of going to work every day with a mandate of thinking 50 years into the future about the intersection of environment and computing. And we can talk a lot more about that in my conversation with Melinda and in Q&A. But really, at the end of the day, that intersection led me down a path of AI research. And then not just AI research, but AI deployment. And so where I really got interested in AI was first as a researcher myself, early on trying to answer research questions that I had posed. I started taking advantage of the AI tools and algorithms so that I could do my own work, the mathematical techniques that AI researchers had made more easily available. I started bringing that into my environmental science core kind of academic work. But then I also saw how hard it was for so many organizations that weren't necessarily a Microsoft Research to actually take on the empowering AI technologies that Microsoft and their similar-minded companies in the broader global markets were putting out. And so I stepped back. I don't know, it was maybe in 2016, something like that. And I wrote a memo called AI for Earth. And that memo laid out thinking around how a company like Microsoft could be more purposeful in not just thinking about the applications for AI in the environmental space, but also to go and work with environmental organizations and learn about how modern AI tools and technologies were and were not useful for these organizations. And that started just as a simple memo, and then it quickly grew to become a 5-year, $50 million commitment on behalf of the company. It ultimately ended up giving out grants and collaborating with over 1,000 organizations in over 150 countries all around the world. And it was really that experience that then led me to get deeper into sustainability and to think about the core, sustainability issues behind these AI technologies that we were trying to use to solve environmental problems. And that's when I became Microsoft's first chief environmental officer and looked after not just the AI for Earth program, which then grew to become this thing that was mentioned in the intro called the planetary computer, which is trying to be basically like an AI DevOps platform for Earth system and environmental analytics. But also just core corporate operational controls. How do we think about building the data center and computing infrastructure that this AI revolution is going to require? How do we do that in a sustainable way? How do we, all the way down to the steel and the concrete and the cement and the servers and the chips and the microprocessors, like all of that needs to be built, created, manufactured, shipped, assembled, deployed in as sustainable way as possible. And so I had a fantastic experience, but one of the things that I also got to do, as was mentioned in the introduction, was to build this $1 billion climate innovation fund. Was tasked with investing $1 billion in pursuit of global climate solutions. And that really taught me about how much innovation was happening out in the broader markets. And it's really what drove me, as we'll talk about a little bit later, towards a second phase of my career as an investor, and particularly as a software investor. So that's a little bit about me and where I'm coming from. I'm fascinated by technology and the role it plays in modern society. I'm really worried about the state of the world's natural environments. I'm very aware of how critically important a healthy natural environment is to modern socioeconomic systems. And I just, a long time ago, I kind of stepped back and I thought, well, what's the right way to think about this problem? And as a scientist, as an environmental scientist, I was trained to understand that the time we live in right now, we all are alive in what scientists call the Anthropocene, which is this geological age defined by humans' negative impacts on Earth's natural environments. So we're alive at this time, but we're also alive, as we've all heard, in this time, this information age, right? This like crazy digitization, ubiquitous digitization of our socioeconomic systems. And I just stepped back and I thought, well, I'm looking for a scalable way to solve problems. And it seems like the only thing I can come up with is deploying the architecture of this information age to counter the negative impacts of this thing that we call the Anthropocene. And now AI is turning out to be one of the fundamental architectural components of the information age. And I'm finding it fascinating to think through kind of again for the third time in my career, the way that all of this is going to sort itself out from an environmental perspective. So there's a little bit of an overview, Melinda, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you and then with some of the other folks on the call as well.
Definitely. It sounds like you've definitely had such an incredible journey just through your entire life, going through for Microsoft, especially, and also now going to an investment firm that's really has, I think, probably a pretty ambitious goal, I would say, which is but a very necessary one, which is to achieve and encourage net zero emissions as well. And I think actually leading us to a first question, I'd say it's also sounded like you weren't planning originally to go down this path, which is definitely very interesting to see where life leads us. But like maybe could you share more about your background and what inspired your career path, blending environmental science with technology innovation?
Yeah, it's interesting, having a career in tech. Most of my friends and colleagues, I didn't really realize this until a bit later, but we had very different paths to technology. I talk to my friends and we're all, telling stories about when we were younger, and they're all like geeking out about the first, computer they
Right.
had and the first game they had and the first, program that they wrote. And I'm like, whoa, that was not me. I was a late and reluctant um embracer of technology. I didn't have a
Mm.
TV in my house. My mom wasn't very excited about me sitting around and like not being outside. She wanted me to be outside, and so she didn't. We didn't have a TV. We didn't have a computer. We didn't have anything. I didn't get my first computer
Wow.
until my first stats class in undergraduate, where I, and so I was definitely a late bloomer when it came to
Mm.
technology. But two things happened. I was very similar, I think, to most people. Like I just went to high school and then thought I should go to college, and I didn't really know why. But I kind of was told that that was the thing you were supposed to do. So I went to college, and I
Right.
knew I knew that I liked science. So I started, studying science, and I took this course called "On the Extinction of Species," and it was the first time ever in school that I was truly interested. Right? When you're sitting there and you hear a teacher, a professor, somebody like talking about something that you're like, wow, like I'm actually fascinated. I'm not falling asleep in this class. I'm so interested. So I, so that's when I knew I wanted to focus my career on environmental issues. And so I did. I went and I did my undergraduate degree in wildlife ecology and zoology. I spent 2 years in Malawi in the U.S. Peace Corps, in a very decidedly non-technology related, 2 years of my life. And then I came back and I started my PhD at Duke University. And all of the questions I wanted to answer ultimately ended up needing computational solutions. So I wanted to ask, for instance, when you create a protected area, like a national park, does that actually work? Like, does saying that it's protected actually protect it? Do the animals inside it like live better lives, reproduce more quickly, etc.? Do the trees get cut down or not, etc.? But I wanted to ask that for the entire world, like all 150,000 protected areas in every country around the world for every tree inside and outside of them, right? And that's the kind of thing where you start thinking, ooh, maybe I'm going to need some more advanced statistical machinery, things like random forest models, et cetera. And maybe I'm going to need some more advanced computational infrastructure than just this little, I won't name company names, but this little laptop that I have in front of me. And maybe I'm going to need to understand the math and the statistics behind how all of this works. And I'm probably going to need to understand how to write the language that makes all of this go, the computer and programming languages. For me, that was primarily R and Python. Um,
Right.
so so that's where that all started. And then that's how I ended up at Microsoft and Microsoft Research, because they were interested in, as I said, the intersection. Because if you're a big computing company, you care about big computing problems. And the biggest data challenge, the biggest compute challenge, the biggest algorithmic challenges are all about either like astronomy and astrophysics, etc., or the environment. There's only 7 billion people on Earth. There's a lot more animals than that. There's a lot more trees than that. There's a lot more information about Earth's natural systems than there is about or there could be way more information about natural systems than there could be about human systems. So, a company like Microsoft really got that. They were like, well, if we're going to push ourselves, if we're going to learn new things, then we need to look at these areas. And so that's how I ended up in tech.
Wow. So definitely, I think, especially in the last recent decades where technology has definitely become more prevalent in our lives, I'd say I personally speaking from experience and also from those around me, I'd say definitely your experience that you shared not having a computer before your first undergrad class for stats. And I think that's probably might be today since this information and this data is so readily available to everyone, right? And especially since technology is getting further integrated into our lives and also can be used for addressing these pressing environmental challenges that you've mentioned you've encountered during your tenure at Microsoft. Like, how do you see the role of technology, particularly AI, in addressing global environmental challenges?
Well, I think fundamentally, I talk about this as like, we talk about the information age, but
Yeah,
it must be the most narcissistic definition of information, right? Because when we talk about the information age, we basically mean, wow, all of this information about us, right? I mean, that's
that's
what,
true.
this whole digital ecosystem is built to get people to click on ads and to, direct people from, individuals to businesses and to do all this stuff. It's all about us. But what makes all of that work, the fabric that all of that sits on top of, are natural systems and the inputs that environmental systems bring: water, timber, food, like all the fundamental building blocks of human societies, clean air. And we actually don't have that much information about those systems. So, a recent paper just came out in Nature last, or maybe it was this week, trying to estimate all of the carbon potential of forest lands in the world. We don't know that, right? But that's kind of scary that we don't know that. I know, like, the 10,000 nearest Starbucks to you right now, but we don't know where all the carbon is coming from or going that's causing the most existential crisis our species has ever faced. So when I think about that, what that says is that we need a massive digitization of Earth's natural resources so that we can better monitor, model, and then ultimately manage them. Because that's what we do with digital information about ourselves, right? Whether you're doing that to make your company run better, your life run better, or whatever. And so, A, we need to digitize that. And then B, we need help analyzing it, understanding it, and making decisions based on it. Because the scope and the scale of the data that we're talking about is so immense. So to be able to even see deforestation, right? If I said, hey, I want you to, I have all of the satellite imagery of the world. I want you to go and find all the deforestation. And that satellite imagery is like, I don't know, 1 meter resolution. Well, the world is a very, very big place, is what you're going to find out. When you're strolling around trying to draw circles around every tree that's been cut down, of the literally trillions of trees, right, on Earth. So you need computational systems to, we call these co-pilots now, but like, you need a co-pilot to kind of help you do that work. And that's where I think the big benefits are going to come. We're going to be able to start to build what I call sustainability systems of record. We're going to, just like these systems of record companies, whether it's, search systems of record or housing systems of record or whatever, they're the companies that have grown up and become so massively profitable and powerful. And we're going to need to build that same type of infrastructure, but for environmental systems. And what's so exciting is like the computational infrastructure and the algorithms are now completely capable of helping us build those copilots.
Right. So it's like definitely by digitization, you mean like taking in all this information and making it ready to process?
It's not just making it ready process, but also processing, right? I mean, I think
Right, right.
when you think about, like, again, let's just think about satellite imagery and our capability of, we're capable and have been for almost a decade in collecting daily high resolution, many multispectral imagery about the planet. But what are you going to do with all of that? Like it right now, I can, what most people do is they sell, one scene at a time and they say, hey, you can go and look at this. It's like, well, no, we need to look at all of it all the time. I mean, this is kind of a cliche thing, but the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? Like that's kind of what we need to do for our global environmental monitoring. And the only way to do global environmental monitoring, of everything everywhere all at once is with large scale computational systems with sophisticated machine learning
Right.
algorithms that are helping you.
And you also talked about how other companies, not just maybe let's say a big giant such as Microsoft, also need to adapt to these computational systems and really looking out for the environment. And then it does, for some, it might sound very challenging, right? Um, for Microsoft, it's definitely very doable. So I'm wondering what's your perspective on this, if how other companies can also adapt to this?
I think I've been, paying attention a lot, as everybody has, to the breakthroughs in particularly generative AI over the last
Right.
year. And what happened for me is that my biggest concern started to disappear, which was I'm in the tech sector. I know the latest and greatest. I know the cutting edge research. I know the incredibly powerful things that we are capable of doing. And I also know how prohibitively difficult doing any of that is for anybody but the world's most skilled AI researcher, right? And and
Right.
I will say I spent a lot of time worrying about that. I spent a lot of time, getting money put together and programs put together and training facilities put together to help people try to catch up. And then what happened with generative AI is we learned how to program tools with natural language and English or whatever your first language is. Now you can just say, write me this code, or you don't even have to have it write you the code and then use it. You can just say, do this thing, right? I think one of the coolest things I'd seen was this happened after I left the planetary computer team at Microsoft. They built this amazing infrastructure, but at the end of the day, and when you step back and you think about it from a technical perspective, it's kind of mind blowing. Like global scale, decadal, high resolution imagery, tons of other data sets, super powerful algorithms, all in open source notebooks and all this stuff. But most people didn't know how to write the code to use
Right.
any of it, you know? Um, and then they built this little, planetary computer copilot thing. It was just kind of like something to show off, But next thing you know, you could just type in, for me, English is my native language. So it's like, where is all the deforestation in, Suriname? And it would, write the code to do that. It would come back and and that just fundamentally changes the game for the accessibility of this technology. And so for me, a lot of people focus on like, wow, isn't that crazy what Chat GPT-4 can do? Or wow, isn't that, yeah, I mean, it is. But like for me, by far the most important, powerful thing that's happened over the past year is that anybody can now interact with AI systems in a way that empowers them. And I did not think that that was going to be possible for decades. And it happened this year.
Right. And I really do agree with your sentiment. I do think it's quite overlooked just how amazing this access to information has been made, right? And in your industry as well, and from what you've seen to not only just maybe generative AI like ChatGPT, you can ask it some questions, but also to environmental data as well. And I think especially since this access to such vast fields of data have increased, I'm wondering now that we have this data, what do you think are the most pressing environmental challenges that organizations, not just like Microsoft, but any organization should be focusing on in the upcoming years?
So I'll say two things. One that's maybe not super AI related, and then I'll say one that's more AI related. I think the most pressing challenge that the world needs to figure out is how to normalize net zero, right? And when I say net zero, that's lingo in the climate world for making sure that at a global perspective, if any carbon or greenhouse gases, but let's just talk about carbon, that all the carbon that humans put into the atmosphere, humans take out. And that also applies for countries. Right? That's the global thing, right? And then how do you achieve global net zero? Well, countries have to be net zero. And how do countries become net zero? Well, they make sure that the companies inside of those countries are operating as net zero as well. And so for me, we need to normalize that. Right now, it is not normal. Like people look at what Microsoft is doing and they're saying, wow, that's amazing, right? People don't look at normal everyday things and say, wow, that's amazing, right? No, because it's normal. Like it's not amazing. It's not amazing. It's just something that people do. If you like get up out of bed and walk outside and get your mail and come back in, people aren't like, whoa, my gosh, amazing. She did it, So we need to get companies to do this in a level that's just like, oh, of course they do. That's what everybody does, and that's what I'm trying to do in my role at Haveli. The second thing that I'll talk about is more of an AI thing, and I'll say this like at a very high level. I already said a little bit. Is like we need to use modern AI systems to figure out fundamentally what is where, how much is there, and how fast is it changing. Those are kind of the 3 steps for global sustainable use of natural resources. But at the moment, we don't actually know how many trees there are. We don't actually know, what's in those trees, like how much carbon is in those trees. And we don't know how fast they're growing and being cut down. That should be terrifying. Like we know that all those things are massive problems, that they may be like existentially bad problems, but we don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, as I was saying before, like AI is going to help us figure that stuff out. Even if you want to think about like biodiversity, species, like that's what got me into all of this. I was like shocked and saddened by the rapid rate of extinction of species and extremely like inspired by the crazy diversity of species on Earth that evolution has developed, and kind of confused that one of the most powerful things inside the information age are code repositories. Like literally you
Hmm.
just, and like, you don't have to ever worry about having lost your code anymore, right? You just literally like versioning is now like
Right.
disappeared in the background and like everything's versioned infinitely, right? And the idea of like deleting any code is nobody does that. It's just all version. But somehow we are totally okay with just randomly deleting massive amounts of evolutionary code every day that took nature millions of years to write. And you're like, that seems weird, right? Like I think we need to change that. But how do we do that? Well, we have modern genomic and metagenomic techniques that use strong machine learning approaches to just go and take, genome metagenomic samples from the environment, and from all of that we can calculate what species are there. And that's a totally different way of looking at, I don't know, the woods outside of your house, or a national park that you might go and visit with your family. And so, yeah, I just think that stuff's all really exciting and it's totally doable now.
I think it's definitely really amazing just to look back and see what AI has enabled us to do, essentially, specifically with the environment as well. And you've talked a lot about how um, there are many challenges that we should be focusing on collectively, not just as organizations, individuals, also as countries as a whole, right? So, do
Yeah.
you personally have a big audacious goal or vision that you have for the future of environmental sustainability that you'd like to see achieved within, let's say, the next decade?
Yeah. I want to see a real planetary computer. I want there to be a search engine that treats space and time as a first class data citizen, where you can go and you can ask anything about the natural world, where you can ask what is here, you know, how much is here, and what used to be here, and what could or should be here, right? All of these types of search questions that generative AI is answering. But I don't want just a little text box. I want
Right.
a spinning globe. I want a planetary computer. Like, I want to be able to go and ask fundamental questions about our planet in the same way that we ask fundamental questions about ourselves. And I want to do that through a generative AI enabled search engine. And that is something that we could do over the next decade if we wanted to. But you asked for something big and audacious. I will not sugarcoat. Like, that is incredibly hard to do. that would require
Definitely.
that would require as many or more people as we as a species have decided need to work on getting people to click on ads, for instance. Right?
Wow.
We would need people working on that as if it were a massive critical social need. And unfortunately, that's not the way our markets really work. And that's not, but
Right.
it's technologically possible if we wanted to do that in a decade. And I don't just think it's critical for us to build solutions to our environmental challenges. I also just like think it would be so cool. Like, to
Right.
have to have that. Like I just think it would be so cool. I want to see it.
Definitely. I think it's not only necessary, but it's really amazing. Imagine like with Google already, we have so much information at our fingertips. If we were able to do that with the environment, I think that's definitely wow, something to look forward to. But And I'm also just curious, like, is this different from what Microsoft is doing with their planetary computer? You mentioned a real planetary computer.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily different than anybody who's working in these spaces. I don't know, look at Microsoft's planetary
Right.
computer, Google's, Earth Engine, or what ESRI does with their, GIS systems, or what maybe Planet, the satellite company is imagining. I think everybody all kind of sees the same big vision, but they've got to like get to where they're going. And
Yeah.
and yeah, so yeah, it's not different than I think what they all. I think many of them would agree, but the question is like, how do you ever get there? And what you
Right.
see in all those different things is they're coming at it from different technology approaches. They're coming at it from different prioritization of what the problems are. Um,
Right.
and um, and so yeah, that's
Definitely. And just also adding in some audience questions because we do have a lot flowing in. As you said, people are approaching from different perspectives, right? And companies these days, of course, there's one issue that I'd say I've personally thought about, and I'm sure you've also thought about as well, is economic incentives, right? That economic incentives have pushed companies to damage the planet, I would say, quite a lot. And so, how do you think that we can change these incentives to promote helping the environment instead?
that's a really good question. I think for those of you in the audience that haven't heard the term externality, if you do and go and take, an economics class, particularly environmental economics class, you're going to hear about two phrases: negative externalities and perverse subsidies. And externalities, we get very complicated here, but just think about like these are things that we don't price in. So
Right.
there's no cost, like you can just emit carbon into the atmosphere. That's just a thing you can do. And nobody is going to stop you. And you can emit as much of it as you want. It doesn't matter, even though existentially it matters. And so, what you're starting to see are, countries either putting a price on carbon, so trying to internalize the externality, or they're doing things like the European Union just did with what's called their cross-border carbon adjustment. So basically, they're taxing carbon at their borders. Those are the sorts of things that we need to do. And then there's also this idea of like perverse subsidies where we actually give economic, we don't just not penalize you for doing things that are potentially negative for the environment, but oftentimes we incentivize you to do that, right? We give you money from to do that, or we charge you less than we would otherwise. And so both of those things are getting more and more, people are trying to kill the perverse subsidies that exist, and they're trying to internalize the negative externalities. And I do think that without some of that critical policy level work that only nation states can really do, we'll struggle to ever get the full buy-in from like what, or to see the full power of like what AI can do for the environment, because we need to have those market signals. And so that part is super important, and also super hard.
Definitely. And I'm think a little straying a bit away from the AI side, but just going to more of sort of the incentives for us to take care of the environment. I'm wondering, why aren't countries, from your perspective and experience in the field, this is something they can do, but why aren't they doing it?
Um, because it's hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard, if we were all just getting started from a cultural and social perspective, right? If we were all just, if rebuilding the humans experiment, and somebody said, hey, this carbon thing is pretty bad, we should do
Yeah.
something about it. I think it would be a lot easier. But I'll give one example. I have two kids, and we live in Seattle, or outside of Seattle, and Seattle is building a light rail,
Mm.
infrastructure, and it's not going to be done for a very long time, like
Right.
2040 or something. And my kids were like, "Why is it taking so long?" And I'm like, "Well, look around, right? I mean, everywhere you look, there's buildings and there's people and there's roads and there's sidewalks and there's light posts and there's power lines and so the bigger we get, the harder it is to change any of our systems. And so that's true not just of the physical things, but of how our socioeconomic systems work, how our money systems work, how our energy systems work. All of that we've spent hundreds of years building up. So now we have to change that. And that's just really, really hard to do. And it can be really
Yeah.
scary, and it can cost a lot of money, and those are all issues that I
Yeah.
think are grappling with.
Yeah. And we also have an audience member asking, just relating to the incentives question, how can AI play a role in that solution?
Well, I think it can lower the cost. It doesn't, if you think
Right.
about one of the big costs uh, for the next, 30 years of climate action that we need to take is going to be in modernizing and expanding our electricity grid infrastructure. And a big part of that is going to be dealing with sources of energy like wind and solar that are what people call intermittent, right? So the wind blows and then it stops. The sun shines and then a cloud goes over it. And that's not the way that the grid historically has been built. That's not the way our electricity systems have been meant to operate. And
Right.
it brings a huge amount of complexity, way more complexity than any human brain could sit there and try to say, okay, on, off, on, off, on, off, right? But we can do that with modern AI systems. We can optimize large, complex physical infrastructure installations like electricity grids. And if we can use that and optimize that, it can lower the cost. And that's a huge, huge consideration for how we're gonna solve some of these problems.
Right. So there's definitely things incoming that would be able to help with that, but it's just about adapting to them. Right.
It's about adapting to it. It's also about, as we were saying, change is hard. So,
For sure.
a lot of the people in power are older than me. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of old, particularly relative to this audience. So and remember, but I'm not that old, and I didn't have a computer when I was a kid. And
Right.
the people in power definitely didn't. So the just understanding what's possible, much less, grabbing onto it and using it, is maybe for younger generations so obvious. Right?
Yeah.
But for older generations is anything but obvious. They don't even know the words, they don't know the technology, they don't. So there's a lot of that, like literally just human level kind of problems that we have to overcome as well.
Might be scary as well for the generations who haven't necessarily gotten to experience it before.
Totally. I think the craziest thing to think about is to go back and think about your great grandparents and
Right.
the world they lived in and the life they had versus the conversation that we are having right now and the tools that you have at your disposal. Just the digital infrastructure that we are using to have this call. I mean, sometimes it'll just blow my mind to think, why in 3 generations we've gotten here. I mean, so yeah, scary. It's scary. I mean, we live in a world that almost wasn't imagined by science fiction writers, 100 years ago. So yeah, I don't blame people. I just want people to like come to the problem set with an open mind, a growth mindset, and like be willing to do the hard, scary work that's going to be needed to transform our society from one that's dependent on ruining the environment to one that benefits from taking care of it.
Definitely. It's about embracing that change, I would say. And also just like going off of not only just seeing how we can get everyone else to implement this, but maybe could you give an example? Someone from the audience is asking about how AI is providing a solution or partial solution maybe to an environmental problem today.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of them. I think, let's just talk about one that a lot of people maybe know about. I don't know. But I've been talking a lot about satellite imagery, just because it's an easy one for people to understand. And if you wanted to say, where are all the trees? Where are all the lakes? Where are all the streams? Where are all the fields? Where are the different crops within those fields? Like, if you wanted to do that so that you could optimize the allocation of land to different things, right? Where's all the solar panels? Where are all the wind farms? And you wanted to take a step back and say, okay, well, I want to optimize, the deployment of all of these. I want to maximize the utility of the land. Well, first you need to know where everything is. And it turns out that even from a machine learning perspective, up until just 2 years ago, that was really hard. You were writing highly specialized, customized algorithms to identify where wind farms are. And then you're driving another one to do solar panels, whatever. And Meta has a new model out called the SAM, segment anything model, right? And it's kind of mind-blowing how good it is at segmenting, things that wasn't trained on doing, but segmenting satellite imagery, for instance, to be able to answer those questions. And so now people are starting to use that, and they're starting to say, okay, like, where's all this information? Like, what crops should I be growing? Like, first, what the question they want to answer is like, what crops should I be growing here to minimize the amount of fertilizer that I have to use, to minimize the amount of drought stress that this particular type of crop that I want to grow is going to be using. Well, first you have to get all that information to then run an optimization. And like the segment anything model, like, didn't exist not that long ago. And now it does. And now people are doing crazy things with it. And it's fun to watch how fast this is all going.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of these really amazing models that have just popped up over the past couple of years, I don't know if you've heard recently. I think this was just a week or 2 weeks ago, about Google's DeepMind weather model. Have you heard about that?
Yeah. So weather is one place where we've seen massive gains. There's another model called Pangu weather that was published in Nature as well. Google's model was just published in Science this week. I actually think a Microsoft researcher just won a MacArthur Genius Award for their work in AI and weather,
Wow.
and 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 think about and I don't want to get too geeky here, right? But some of these things, like weather modeling, fire modeling, some of these physical processes can that are worth billions and billions and billions of dollars, right? Understanding the weather, understanding where fires are going, understanding all this stuff for insurance markets and just people's livelihoods and lives. Right? Traditionally, we model these using numerical systems, right? That take a long time to run. These are really complex models that take a long time to run. And and basically bake in the fundamental laws of physics and thermodynamics and all that kind of stuff into these models. And and AI has the potential to kind of learn all of those fundamental laws of nature and then deploy model, skill against them in orders of magnitude less time. It used to be that when a fire started, it was burning faster than the model could predict where it
Yeah.
was going, right? And when weather
Right,
systems,
right.
come in and do the same thing, but now with these AI systems, we can do things fast. I mean, we can also have better skill, and that's the obvious one, the obvious benefit. But we can also do things faster, and that is really important when it comes to just everyday things like weather and also catastrophic things like natural disasters and fires.
It's life-saving as well.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd say we also have someone in the audience asking this question. I had this question as well. Because definitely there's all these amazing technologies, and I think as generations progress and progress, we're also going to have more and more developments, right? So I'm wondering, like when you were at Microsoft, did your team offer any programs where Microsoft engaged with high school students on environmental issues, just like exposing the next generation to these? If so, could you give a few examples?
Yeah, not as many as I would like. That was
Yeah.
I would say that that's one of the biggest issues that I never really had a great answer to. There was so much demand. We had some high school internships, um, but nowhere near enough to satisfy the demand. Right? We did things through our STEM and coding curricula and that sort of thing to like help kids on the kind of the coding ladder and all of that, but we never really succeeded in figuring out how to scale the intersection of that and the environmental work into kind of like the high school kind of age cohort and educational curriculum. We did things here and there, particularly like through the Xbox division and the gaming division of some educational things, but um, nowhere near as much as I would have liked.
Right. That I definitely think that it's really interesting to hear how Microsoft was definitely trying to engage the next generation with these efforts. And I, of course, thank you again that you're here today speaking with our audience. I think that's also another way where more young people can actually be exposed to these technologies and these issues as well. And I'm wondering, I know we're a bit over time. I'm wondering if you have time for a few more questions.
Sure, let's do two. Let's do two more.
Fantastic. Okay. I'd say just also I of course don't want to neglect your investing side as well. Because I think it's really interesting how you mentioned your work with Microsoft's climate fund has actually led you to join Haveli eventually, right? So I'm
Yeah.
wondering like what made you decide to move to the investment side? Like are there any particular companies that you've come across that you're excited about in terms of environmental impact?
Yeah, I think that what led me to move into the investment world was kind of there's a couple different parts to it. One was I looked at technology and the technology sector, and I looked at finance and the finance sector,
Right.
and I thought, wow, finance has a long way to go to to catch up to where it needs to be. And I really wanted to help them move as fast as possible. I really wanted to help the whole like world of finance see what was possible and take advantage of it. And for for that to happen, you have to show two things. One, that you can run companies sustainably at a profitably and sustainably, and you have to show that building solutions in this space is a profitable endeavor, a profitable enterprise. And there's a lot of activity in this space. We're dedicated kind of software and gaming investors, so we have a very particular focus on it. But there are lots of multi-billion-dollar funds out there that are focusing on climate investing, whether it's the hardcore tech, what people call deep tech, some of the material science, etc. The role of industrial solutions like direct air capture, where they're literally sucking air out, taking the carbon out. All of that is going to create, I believe, like, if you step back and actually believe that the world is going to transition to a net zero carbon economy, and you understand that the vast majority of the world's economic value today is somehow predicated on the emissions of greenhouse gases, that means we are about to go on the greatest value creation journey of our species history over the next 4 decades.
Wow.
Like, how cool is that? Like, don't you want to be part of that? Don't you want to like help those people that are building those solutions succeed? Don't you want to be part of the success? Don't you want to like look back and say like, well, how cool, like I was there, I was there. I was part of it. And I felt really lucky to be able to say that about the tech boom. Like, I wasn't there in
Right.
1975 when Microsoft started, but when I started, there was no data center. Like, the cloud happened while I worked at Microsoft. I mean, how crazy is that, right? And this economic transition is going to happen while I'm still alive and working. And I can like just look back and be like, whoa, isn't that crazy? I was there when like the cloud was built. I want to be able to look back and say, whoa, I was there when like this massive economic value creation happened. I was part of that. And so yeah.
Right. That's honestly, it's amazing to think how quickly these developments are coming on, and you've definitely been at the forefront experiencing these. And I think especially with on the investing side, just the link between how economics actually ties into these environmental concerns that we have is fascinating,
Yeah.
frankly. I'd say. Definitely. And I think just to be mindful of the time, I know we have a lot more questions. Unfortunately, we can't get through to all of them today, but I'd say just as a closing question, since we did say two more questions, um, as for all the young people who are in the audience or maybe watching this stream or maybe the recording later on YouTube, what word of advice do you have for young professionals or students who are interested in pursuing careers in the intersection of environmental science and technology? As someone yourself who's been in this industry for so long and has seen so many things come and go, what would you give as advice?
Yeah, that's a great question because things are changing so fast. I'm pretty sure that whatever I tell you today is going to be obsolete in a year or 6 months. Except, I think all I would say is just find that thing that you're passionate about, that you're excited about. Like, don't just choose a problem because you think it's an important problem. Like, choose a problem that if you had a different job, you'd go home and work on this problem after you got done with work. Like, and then
Right.
make that your job. And, the majority of this audience is at that phase where they can make those decisions still, right? When I go and talk to a bunch of 50-year-olds, like, they're like, well, it's a little late for that. But this audience, it's not too late. Like, literally, like like I said at the beginning, I took this class on the extinction of species, and I said that's what I want to do. And I didn't say, wow, do I
Yeah.
want to be a tech guy? No, I was like, I ended up there because that's part of me solving the problem. I didn't say, wow, I want to be a finance guy. I ended up there because that, like, is where tech took me. And so, but I still wake up every day just like crazy motivated to try to
Yeah.
stop the extinction of species. That's like what I care about, and I don't feel like I don't apologize for that. I don't try to explain it. It's just me. I just care about it, and so that's what I'm going to work on. And and I do think if you can just think about how to structure your education and your career in the direction of something that you care about that much, I will say at the very least, boy, does it make school and work a lot more fun. So, um,
Definitely.
and life should be fun. So
Definitely. And I have a mentor who has said something that's really resonated with me. I'm not sure if you would also resonate with this as well, which was he said he's already retired now, but he said that he's never worked a day in his life. So
yeah,
he's been doing something right.
that he loves. Yeah, a similar thing that I like to say is a lot of people who are into um, like academics. You might hear a professor say something like this. Oh, I want to live a life of scholarship. You know, um, and I've always thought about it the same, but with one word change, which is I want to live a life on scholarship. Like, I want to get paid
Mm.
to learn. My whole life, I want to get paid to learn. And so
Wow.
I've always pursued those opportunities. And to date, I can say that that's always been true. Every job I felt like, wow, like I'm getting paid to go to school. How cool is that?
That's so
Uh,
cool.
so, so anyway, there we have it. Well, thank you for inviting me on. This has been really fun
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, definitely. And for me as well, and the audience, I'm sure, of course, they loved the talk. So definitely. And I think as Dr. Joppa said, for those who are interested, you just find something you love, right? And if AI is what you love, and depending on what intersection, right, then you're already pursuing that by being here, taking the time out of your day to learn from this conversation. And we hope that everyone benefited from this conversation as well. And if you have any other if you want to keep up to date with Youth AI Lab, or you're interested in hearing from more speakers such as Dr. Joppa, we highly suggest you sign up on our website at the link I just sent in the chat, or subscribe on any of our social media or YouTube channel to just keep up to date and really just stay engaged in this amazing world and the developments that just keep coming, right? And again, Dr. Joppa, thank you so much for just taking time out of your day to really share with us the amazing things that are going on in your world, right? With environmental science and AI. So definitely, we can't thank you enough for all your invaluable insights you've given us today. Really appreciate the time.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, had a fantastic chat. Definitely.